Alright guys, welcome back to our Django series. My name is Garrett, and in this series, we're learning about Django, and we're going to be building a blog with Django. Alright, so if you guys remember, this is where we left off. We have basically the initial Django page that tells you that Django worked. Alright, so I know that in the last video I said that we're going to be doing both the settings file as well as the models, but I think it's kind of a lot to do both of those things. So let's just take a look at the settings. We're going to have to use pip install to take care of a lot of things to get some functionality that we don't currently have right out of the box. So let's take a look and do that. If you still have your server up and running because these videos were out together, then what you want to do is you want to hit Control and C. That's on a Mac. On a PC, now that I'm thinking about it, the control button is the same thing as the command button. So I don't actually, I think, right? Maybe? I have a Mac, so I'm not really sure. But at any rate, it's Control C, and it should tell you if you're on a PC what to hit. But basically, this is where it's telling us right there. That line right there tells you how to quit the server. All right, so let's X out of these things. Let's go into the blog, and let's open up the settings file. Okay, so in here, there's a couple of things that I want to walk you guys through, and then there's a couple of things that we're going to want to install so that we can basically use this functionality later when we go to do other things and set up different aspects of our website. Okay, so first things first, we have import OS. Leave that there. We're not going to mess around with that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to build some paths that are basically going to tell Django where to look for certain things. So first, we're going to create the template directory. Now, basically, last time we added some folders into both our apps as well as to our overall project that were going to be used later on. So what do those things do? What did we add? So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to walk you guys through really quick because it's going to give some better context to what we're doing in the settings file. First thing we did is we added the media folder. Now, the media folder is where user-generated content would be stored. Now, I don't mean text. That is all going to get stored inside of our database. But let's say a user stores or uploads a picture as part of a blog post that they are writing. So we would want to store that somewhere, and we can't store it inside of the database because I think that only gets stored as text. What we want to do is we need to store the file in our media folder. And you could, I guess, technically call this whatever you want, but it is standard, considered best practice to call it media. So that's why I created the media folder right here. Don't worry about adding things to that. We're going to add other folders there as we go along, but right now just leave that be. The next thing we did is we added, let me X out of this. The next thing we did is we added a static folder. Now, what is static? So the media folder is where things that users upload would go, certain files. Static is where other files that we create as the developer will go to store them to tell Django where to look. There's a piece of fuzz. Things like our CSS files or our JavaScript files or maybe some other stuff that would always be the same, we could put in that folder. But CSS and JavaScript are the main things. We're not going to add anything in there yet because we haven't actually done anything with CSS or JavaScript, but that's where we're going to be adding those things later on. The next thing that we did was inside, or not inside, just here we added the templates folder. Now, templates are what Django uses to display pages to the end user in your browser. So, for example, you might have a template that would be for the homepage, and on that homepage, you would have a list of all of your posts, maybe a sidebar, a navigation bar, things like that. So the template is where you would make the frame, so the structure for that content, and then you would use what are called template tags to be able to dynamically inject the content from your database. That might be a little confusing right now, but it won't be later on when we go through it. Now, we added a template folder outside in our main project file or folder, but we also added a template folder inside of our app folders, each one of them, users and posts. Now, why did we do that? And also inside of that template folder, we added another folder called posts. Now, why did we do that? This just goes back to the whole idea of modularity or being modular, which is that if we had templates that were for the entire project across the board, including our specific apps, if we had those templates, basically our HTML files, inside of that main template folder for the project, and we wanted to go and take that app and put it into a different project, we wouldn't be able to do that as easily because it wouldn't actually have all of the files that it needs to be able to do that. Now, if you don't want to do this, it's up to you. I'm going to teach it to you how to do that because That's actually the best practice. So we did that, and then we added inside posts because it just has to do with where Django goes to look for things that you want to have templates. So you would have the app folder name, and then templates, and then the app folder name again. So now let's go back to the settings file. Now that we clarified that, we want to add a few lines of code that are basically going to enable us to tell Django where to look, or help to tell Django where to look for these specific files. So as you can see, you have this thing right here that says base.dir, or dir is a directory. So what we want to do is we're going to be using that. So it's pretty awesome that they've already done that for us. And we're going to all caps, type in template.dir equals os.path.join, and then we're going to add base directory, and we're going to call it templates because this is the folder that we set up so that Django knows where to look for templates. Next, we're going to do the same thing for media. So we're going to do media underscore directory, and this is going to be equal to os.path.join, and this will be base.directory, and then it's called media because this one was called media. I just want to preface with saying that because I am accustomed to coding with Django 1.11 and this is Django 2.0, there may or may not be some areas where we get some errors. Let's scroll down a little bit to this secret key. Now, this site's never going to be going live, so the fact that you guys can see my secret key is irrelevant, but you're going to have a certain secret key in your project. It will be very different from mine probably. Don't show it to everyone. It's called the secret key for a reason because that's how Django, I think it has to do with validation and other security things within your Django project. So don't mess around with that. Next is debug equals true. We're going to leave this set to true. However, basically you'll see this later on is that when you're developing your Django site, Django has an awesome debugger, which basically when you're trying to run something, it will basically tell you what the problem is and where the problem came from so that you can easily fix it. I've only seen the debugger in version 1.11, so I can only imagine how much cooler and better it is in version 2.0. But regardless, keep that set to true. If you were to go and push your project to be in production, so on a live server so people can go and actually use it, and we're going to cover that too later on, you would want to change that to false. But for now, keep it set to true. Next are the allowed hosts. Now, we're not going to change these at all. This would be in case you're going to a production environment, so live, you would want to put the places at which people could access your website. So for example, you would put in your domain name, you would put in localhost there, and that basically allows people to access and view your website by going to those names in their URL bar in the browser. But it's not really that relevant to us right now. This part right here, we're actually going to be doing a lot with. This is installed apps, and this actually we're going to be doing a lot of fun things with. A lot. Basically, every time you add an app or install an app using pip, you want to come back here and go into installed apps and make sure that you add them, because otherwise Django won't actually know where to get those files and information from because you're probably going to be using them somewhere in your project, and they won't be registered with Django. Actually, that's what would happen if you didn't have them in installed apps, although Django won't even let that be the case. Django will tell you that you have to add it to installed apps. So it's really, really good about being able to help you out as you're coding. And I'll actually show you guys an example of that in a moment. So right now what we want to do is we actually want to edit this. So because we just created 2 apps, if you remember in the last video, what we're going to do is add those apps. So type in single quotes. I think you can use double too, but personally I like to use single. That's just what Django does, and so I like to just stick with that theme. But add in posts, and then down here we're going to add in users. Okay, great. So we've done that. The middleware. Now, what is middleware? This can be like a tutorial series in and of itself, but middleware is basically like it's usually just like a layer of functionality that allows you to do something that Django has created for you. You can create your own middleware. You can, I think, download middleware from other places using pip or something like that. But for example, the middleware that comes out of the box that you would use would be security. So it adds a level of security, the level for sessions, authentication for users, things like that. So definitely don't make any changes there. You probably honestly won't really use it that much unless you're doing some like really, really advanced, more customized stuff. But for right now, you're not really going to be using it. This basically is where the URLs live, which is this file right here. Don't mess around with that. Unless you think that you know what you're doing or you want to purposely break it so that you can see how to fix it or see what happens, it's already set up, it works, just don't mess around with that. But basically, that's where it's telling Django where to look for the URL configurations that you will have for your website. Now, this we are kind of going to be not messing around with, but just adding to a little bit. This basically tells Django how to use the templates, how to properly execute them, and how to work with them. What we want to do here is, let's see, you see this directory, and it's a list, a blank list. What we want to do is add in our template directory that we created earlier. So just add it in and leave it like that. Next, this WSGI application, if you remember, I pointed out that file before. Again, this is something you just don't want to mess with. It's doing its own thing, and it's pretty important to be able to help you out with. Now, the database. Okay, if you're just developing something in a development environment, you can probably leave the database set to SQLite, which is what it's automatically set up to by default. There's nothing wrong with it, but for more advanced production, or not more advanced, just for a production environment, basically when you're ready to push your site to be live, you'd want to change that to PostgreSQL or MySQL database, and that's because basically SQLite is really good and it's fast and it's lightweight, obviously, as the name implies, but you can only have one connection at one time, I believe, so it's not really that great for production environment. For right now, we're going to leave that be, but later on when we do go to push this live, we're going to end up having to change it. The next thing that we're going to want to add are the password validators. Now, the password validating system that we will be using is something called Argon 2. Not password validator, I'm sorry. These are the password validators right here. Don't mess around with those. What I'm talking about are the password hashers that we're going to be using. Now, basically, these are the algorithms that will be used to take a user's password and change it into a hashed value, I believe, that basically makes it extremely hard for people to crack and hack into their profiles. So I'm just going to be copying and pasting. There's really no reason to be like typing this in. I will make sure to have this code, that bit right here, in the description so you can just copy and paste it. But if you would like to pause the video and type it in, more power to you, whatever you want. But basically, what this does is it basically tells Django how to hash a password. I don't really know what the default is, but basically, if Django will first and foremost try to use this password hasher called Argon 2. Now, Argon 2, I think, was developed by like the NSA or something like that. It's really, really secure. I think it won the award for like the most secure password hashing algorithm in like 2015. There's like competitions every year. It's very secure, and so I would recommend using it. That's what I use on all my stuff. Basically, what this does is Django will attempt to use this password hasher algorithm. If that doesn't work, it will go back to this one, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty secure, and just by adding those, I think 5 right there, basically your site, you'll be good to go. We have, this is not relevant right here. We just talked about that. This stuff down here, now this is some information that just goes along with the project, with the website. You can set things like the language code. It's set to English and US. If you want to get more information about that, about internationalization, it's called apparently, go to this link right here and it gives you more information. But that's where you can set things like the time zone and other stuff. The only other thing that we do want to add, I believe, is site ID. Now, I'm assuming this is still relevant for Django 2.0, but I've run into problems before where I did not add the site ID and then my website didn't work and I would spend hours trying to figure it out, and all I had to do was add that little line of, not even code, just a little line. So just be wary of that. The next thing we're going to want to do is come back down here. Now, this is the static URL, which basically tells Django that for all static files, so JavaScript and CSS, look in that static folder that we talked about earlier. We do, however, want to add a little bit onto this. So let's get some returns in here so that we're not staring at the bottom of the screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to add static underscore root and static underscore directory. And then we're also going to do static files underscore directory. Hopefully I spelled all these things right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to comment this out. No, we're going to comment this out and say media, which is not spelled like that. Media files, we'll call it. And right below here, we are going to add media root and media URL. Okay, so now let's go and add the actual stuff that should be coming off of those. So first we want for static root, we just want the same thing again, which is static. And then for static directory, we want basically the same thing that we had at the very top. So we can actually just go all the way up to the top and copy one of these guys, come back down to the bottom, copy and paste that, and just type in static like so. And then for this is going to be a little bit different. For this is going to be a list. And in here, we're just going to put static directory, comma, that's it. Okay? Now for the root, we're going to do more or less the same thing. This is going to be media directory, which is from the top. And then what we're going to do is add the same thing as we did up there, but it's just going to be media. Okay? So that basically will now handle all of our static and media files within our project. For now, that's fine. That's all we're going to do. And actually, when I said remind me of this stuff, the interesting thing is that the settings file is, at least for me, hasn't really been something that I've gone into. I only go into it when I'm doing a new project, which isn't all that often, or when I'm adding something to a current project. But even when I'm adding something to a current project, I'm generally doing it within the models, the views, the forms, URLs, all those other files. So the settings file, at least setting up a project from scratch, is generally not something you're going to have to do very often. So once you guys have done that, you won't have memorized it for the next time you want to set up a project, but you will at least have it to use as a reference. What we do want to do is install, we want to pip install Argon 2. So, yeah, pip install Argon 2. And this is the hashing method that I talked about earlier. You have to actually install it to be able to use it. So what you want to do is you want to come over here. Wait, hold on. Let me just make sure we got the right one. Come here, and we're going to do this right here, and we're going to install this. So we're going to go to our terminal. Make sure that you're in your virtual environment and run pip install Argon 2, and it's going to install everything. For me, I already did this before, so the requirements are already satisfied is what it says. But for you guys, we'll go through this install process, and that you will just want to wait for that to be done. That is going to be it for this video, so we just have to set up the settings file as well as do that pip install so you can see how pip install works now. So in the next video, we're going to actually be going through how to code out our models, which basically allows us to save and store and use, really, user data. Or just data in general, but for our case, user data. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay tuned in the next video. If you think you're interested in watching this series, but you're not already subscribed, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. And also, if you're not signed up on Everest, go do that. Also, a link in the description below. Everest is a social network for connecting, sharing, and learning from other developers and other designers. So if you're interested in doing that, hit the link below and go sign up. Check it out. Start posting stuff, and I hope to see you guys over there. All right, take care, guys. See you in the next video. Peace.